The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirkydog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine, and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. We're coming to you live from Salem, New Hampshire, and today we're going to talk about what a leash means to your dog.
Sounds like a great topic. I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to delve into this podcast, guys.
Scott's enthusiasm is skyrocketing. Okay, first we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day.
Hang on a second. Let me grab the pig.
There we go. Oh,
Thanks.
tell him.
Slow her down.
All right. Tell him about what you're smoking, though. I wanted you to say it because you had to put it down.
Smoking a Charter Oak cigar, the Habano.
And why did you pick that one
today? I
today?
picked this because one of my favorite YouTubers that I follow is called the Dry Creek Wrangler. And that's a guy that has a Wrangler school. He teaches people how to pack horses and do all that stuff. But he always takes a break and has a cigar and talks about his cigars. So yeah, that's how I stumbled into him. And
Scott's learning about the horse thing because I'm going to get a horse.
I'm learning more than I need to know about tack. And also a little bit about cigars.
Buddy's taking his cigar recommendations now, too. So since he put the cigar down, I wanted to mention it. Our quirky tip of the day is actually Cammie, who was on our Wavoto podcast. She lives on our street. She was over the other day with her Corgi, which I think Andrea Rigler coined the phrase, a mini blue heeler, which is a great term for that breed. So I was doing the dog's nails. We were chatting, and she has the dog on this new supplement treat kind of thing called Fin Allergy and Itch. And she said it's making a huge difference. Her dog was on the podcast with us, Trixie, for a bit, and then Scott went and sat with her. And Trixie is a fun little corgi, but a lot of stuff seasonally and stuff. So give this company a try. I know nothing about them. I'm going off of Cammie's word. She looks for the best of the best. It's petfin.com, and it's Fin, F-I-N-N. But if you have some allergy stuff going on, it's worth a try. I thought the ingredients looked pretty good, and I wanted to give it for a quirky tip because allergy season is here for sure.
I didn't realize that.
Well, you've been a little coffee and stuff too. And you're doing better. But Scott ran 5 miles yesterday. I have to give him a shout out because I put him down on Bobby's podcast and I said, "You're not going to run 5 miles. Why are we even talking about this?" And
my goal is I'm going to be doing 6 miles for 60.
But yesterday you ran 5 miles and that was the first time in
probably 30 years.
Yeah, that was a lot. So it was very impressive.
I got a lot of pain going down the left arm.
But he's here to podcast. All right, we're going to talk about what a leash means to your dog. I brought a bunch of different leashes. And this podcast is honestly inspired. We have an older dog, an older rescue, Max. He came from the same house as Gaia, who was on another podcast. And he's probably like 15. He's a doodle mix. So, he has to get up early. He sleeps in a crate. Jimmy sleeps in our bed. But he makes a lot of noise, probably around like 6 to 7. So he's always one of the first dogs out, wants to get out, move along with his day. And then he comes in and he chews his freaking feet. And it drives me crazy. He's always done this. Maybe I should put him on this supplement, but it seems to be more of an anxiety tick for him.
Can I back you up for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, he gets more freedom now than just about any dog in the house. And his freedom has turned into getting out of the crate early to hanging out in the living room to now he jumps up on the bed and chews his feet right at Jess's feet.
So he gets to come in the bed with us and Jimmy after he gets back in. And sometimes he chews his feet on the ground. And literally, I am in bed. I'll take socks, just socks. Don't judge me. I'm trying to throw them. He's also deaf, so I can't say, "Max, don't chew your feet." And then he gets up on the bed and chews them. So the other day I was like, I'm dealing with this. So I went and I got a leash and I just put a leash on him so I could control him. And literally you put a leash on him, he acted like I killed him. He didn't lick his feet. He laid in the bed after we got up to go have breakfast. It was the funniest behavior change ever, but it was pretty dramatic, no?
Yes, and I'm surprised because he doesn't get any kind of control put on him.
Yeah, we put him on a leash to go to the groomer once a month and walk him. It's not a thing, but literally I put the leash on him in bed and he just laid there and slept. And now we just keep a leash in the bedroom. And if he starts chewing his feet, we put the leash on. So I thought it was a funny thing that happened in our household with Max, but then when we were discussing it, like a leash for some people, the dogs see the leash, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going for my walk. And they're escalating like to this crazy state of arousal. So we're going to talk about leashes and what the leash means to your dog. And I don't necessarily know what a leash should mean to your dog, but normally it creates some sort of behavior change. So we're going to talk about.
I have some good ideas.
All right. What are your good ideas? What are your good ideas?
A dog should have some nice manners and not be a complete idiot.
That's true.
With or without a leash, but at least if you can put a leash on, that they should settle down.
Yeah, and I don't care. Well, I'm saying like if they get excited and then you can tell them to sit and then they go for a nice mannered walk. If the leash creates excitement, that's fine. But if they feel a leash on them or, that means like automatically start pulling. A lot of people have more reactivity on a leash. They'll have zero problems with, other people or dogs if the dog is just loose and out and about in an open space. But then when the leash goes on, that behavior changes. So really, it's an interesting question. What does the leash mean to your dog? And I would say to our dogs, the leash does put on another layer of control, not quite to the sense that Max does.
Jimmy gets very excited when I grab the leash.
Oh, you don't put a leash on Jimmy.
I did have a companion story to Max.
Okay, go ahead.
We had a golden retriever in for training a few years back, and so the dog trained really well. Real smart dog, nice, balanced dog, nothing really crazy. And the lady calls me. I was going to her. She was in Boston, and I was doing some follow-up classes, and she said, we really got to work on the jumping. And when people come over, the dog jumps all over them. And I said, okay, I'll come and knock on the door, and we'll kind of treat it like I'm a guest coming to visit you. Do me a favor, put the leash on him before I get there. So I go, ring the doorbell, knock on the door. She comes and answers the door. I said, where the hell's the dog? And the dog is laying on the rug in the living room, didn't even get up.
So the leash solved that problem
But it had
quickly.
the leash.
Yeah.
I said, what's going on? She goes, he never acts this way. And I said, well, what's different? She said, well, I put the leash on him. That's it. I said, well, if that's all you got to do, and a lot of in kind of traditional dog training, I was told years ago that to get a dog off leash, you start with them on leash, and then you start cutting that leash shorter and shorter over a period of weeks or months, so that it turns into a tab where you have just 3 inches or 6 inches of leash that you can actually grab if you need to redirect, or the dog is moving out of a heel. You have something you can grab onto. So in that case, just putting a leash on the dog totally changed that craziness.
Yeah, and we often will recommend when a dog goes home that especially if it was a dog that was younger, over aroused or something, as the dog's just integrating into the house, let the dog drag a leash around. Now, no, you're not going to have a collar on its neck that can compress and can choke the dog if it goes around the corner and the leash gets stuck. And you're never going to do this if you're not home and the dog isn't supervised. But just having something for the dog to drag around sometimes creates another layer of control, and it gives you a way to intervene. Like Scott said, if somebody's coming to drop off a package, you can go grab a leash, bring the dog to the crate. It's an easier way to deal with the dog directly. And you just saw a mini poodle on the base the other day, and you told me that the dog was afraid of the leash. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, and I will say that, I know we're using the word leash, but if you're going to let the dog drag it around in the house, I refer to it more as a drag line, which means we cut the handle off. There isn't a handle that can hook onto things either. It's just a 5-foot piece of leash. Get your shittiest leash, for lack of a better description,
and cut
the handle off it, and let it just be a light drag line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was at a house the other day with a standard poodle and a mini poodle, and I know this little mini poodle was just awesome. She would bring me her little stuffed animals, and I'd throw them, and she'd retrieve them, bring them back to me, almost like a pain in the ass. She had such retrieve in her, which was awesome. And then we were talking about the younger but standard poodle and really bad leash manners. And they had a harness for the dog and all this stuff that was not helping their cause. But I said, well, what about the little one? And they said, oh, the little one hates the leash. The dog won't even move on the leash. And I said, oh, interesting. Go get the leash. Let me see. I want to see if she'll retrieve with the leash on. They said, she will not do anything. And I put the leash on the dog, and she'd already, keep in mind, retrieved for me a half a dozen times. So she was in that play mode. And I threw the toy across the room, and she went halfway across the room and stopped because the leash was on her. And she was inhibited by the leash. She didn't like it. But I got the toy again, and I threw it just 3 feet in front of her. She got it, picked it up. And within 2 minutes, she's doing full room retrieves with the leash on, getting over this little inhibition or whatever it is about the leash. She was just adjusting to it really quickly. So a lot of people, they feel like, oh, my dog doesn't like a leash, and that's for many reasons they don't like putting the dog on a leash because they feel like the dog doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Which leads us to another podcast.
Well, and also, like, if you have good off-leash control, which is why I brought up Jimmy. I mean, if Scott's at a class or he's downtown Boston, of course, he's putting a leash on the dog. But for the most part, Jimmy does a lot of, like, off-leash stuff. Sometimes if your dog is always off-leash, and this isn't so specific to Jimmy, but some other off-leash dogs, they're losing some other sense of control. So sometimes it's good to, like, just go back to your basic, like, hey, I'm going to put a leash on my dog and take him to Home Depot. I'm going to put a leash on my dog and walk him, downtown, see what things look like. Just reestablishing that routine of, like, I need you to politely walk on a leash. And that was a great example with the small poodle, that if your dog hates a leash and considers a leash like aversive for some way, shape, or form, maybe it's the environmental factor of the weight of the leash behind him, whatever that is. If your dog loves to eat, then maybe put the leash on, feed your dog. If your dog loves toys, put the leash on, do some toys with the dog. Don't make the leash about, like, you're getting a leash on because we're going to your vet appointment, or you're getting a leash on because, you're going to grandma and grandpa's for the weekend while we go on vacation. If the leash has a certain connotation, depending on how you play it, you can switch things around. So let's talk about the dogs that are super crazy over-aroused when they see the leash, because this is a pretty common one too.
Yeah, and that goes for anything they associate with getting out of the house and dragging you down the street.
Is a party.
And going maybe to see the neighbor's dog, and all this fun stuff associated with getting out of the house. And the precursor to getting out of the house is that you have to grab the leash to put on the dog. So you're building in this craziness, and on top of that, and most people hate that. They hate the craziness. But at the same time, they're creating it with verbal cues.
Yeah, you want to go for a walk?
You ready to go outside? And the dog starts friggin' jumping,
Yeah.
and now they're going to get the leash, and they can't get the leash on this jumping dog.
Yeah.
So, the way, if you're asking how I would fix that, and it just goes back to grabbing that leash and not going for a walk, and changing things up so and stopping activating your dog with these trigger phrases that are getting him crazy.
Yeah, 100% changing the routine. If your dog is used to being conditioned to staying in a crate, maybe when your dog's coming out of the crate, just hook your dog up and then take them for the walk. Like, be conscious of these little routines you're creating. And if it's excitement and joy and the dog's running around and excited about a walk and you have no issues on your walk, we don't care. But if you have a ton of arousal in your house as you're reaching for the leash, preparing to go on the walk, your dog's dragging you, maybe even, physically hurting you. Some bigger dogs can actually, like, hurt people's shoulders, pull people down. Your dog's reacting adversely to other people or dogs or trucks, whether it be, I don't care if it's fear or over arousal, whatever. If you're not having a good walk, your pre-walk behavior should be something that you look at and consider. And so many people are like, the dog goes out the back door to go to the bathroom. The dog goes out the front door when we're leaving the house. Like, sometimes have the dog in the backyard, go out the back gate, go for your walk, switch it up, change it up. But you can change the way your dog perceives a leash. And the leash is the one training tool, Scott always says this, that you're really never going to get rid of completely. Like, you're not ever going to go to a vet and not have your dog on a leash. You're probably not going to be walking on sidewalks and not have your dog on a leash. Like, the leash is something that you always go back to. So the relationship with the leash is an important one as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, and I say that in relation to, quite often, if I suggest even a plastic pinch collar, something that the owner perceives as an aversive, one of the very first things I hear is, well, when will we not need that anymore? It's a tool.
Sometimes,
just like the leash
not
is a
always,
tool.
but sometimes.
Quite often. They're like, well, how long do we have to use that? How long do you want to train your dog? How long are you going to be feeding your dog?
Yeah.
But I did want to say, I don't know if we're getting off track, but I was just looking at this pile of leashes. And there's a lot of different styles of leashes. And this one that is, what do you call this, a boa type of a leash? But this
like a
is
tugging leash.
A tugging leash. So quite often you'll see this in agility, where the leash is not only a means of control, but it's also the reward, which is really cool because the dog is coming back, they're tugging on the leash. But of course the dog needs to learn there's rules associated with that leash because most dogs are tugging on a leash as a game that the owner cannot stop.
Yeah.
So the dog is just put the leash on. As soon as you try to get the dog to calm down, walk next to you, they grab the leash, start tugging, making a big game, and naturally the owner starts pulling against that, saying no, stop, and creating more of a game.
Yeah, well, and I
gets into a
want to
bigger
mention
problem.
that, we'll go to break here in a sec, but I want to mention that in relation to agility, that there also has to be control and rules with that, because people will get disqualified if your dog's running out of the ring to grab their leash. Some venues, like if your dog's diving on the leash, uncontrolled, that's an issue. So you also have to have control with that play. And like Vital is a great example of like, if I walk her in a leash like this, and if you're listening, it's like this fuzzy pink thing that hooks to her collar. We're walking like, hey, I'm using this as a distraction. Yes, I'll let her tug on this, but of course she'd like to just drag this along the whole way. This is something where I'm proofing okay, you're walking on a leash. Are you behaving or are you not? All right, let's go to break super quick, and then we'll talk more leashes when we get back.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirkydog Podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirkydog Podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, all right. Since we got into different types of leashes before we went to break, I want to circle back to that. So I really like these like slip leads. This one's biothane, but I like slip leads that I can put on my girls and just kind of go. So the biothane.
Could I interrupt you there? That's not a slip lead. That's more of a martingale style
Okay,
lead.
it's more of a martingale style
I'm
lead.
not crazy about the slip leads. They tend to cinch up and don't loosen up.
All right, so we're going to call this a martingale style. Who knew that Scott would be correcting my leash
I'm not
terminology? But
correcting
he's
you, but I'm
right.
saying
It's
that's
right. It's
not
true.
a slip lead.
It's true. It's true. The slip leads like that they put on
Let's
at
go
the
out of the
vet.
vet. Yeah,
yes,
the freebies.
like that just kind of becomes a choker. We don't like those quite as much. These martingale things that cinch up as, they go around the dog. I get a wider one, so if I don't have complete control all the time, my dog's not choking itself. And then if you just get a biothane one, it's a little less attractive for the dog to be coming back and tugging. But this to me is very simple, that if my dog's not always wearing a collar, I have a leash, I can go, I have everything all at once.
The nice thing about the biothane is you can put bumblebees on there.
It's my bee leash.
And what do you call these? I forget.
I don't know. Little crystals.
Bedazzles.
Yeah,
you can bedazzle it.
Yeah, you can. There's literally accessorizing the leashes and the collars and the tags is for sure a thing now. We talked about these a little bit. These come in the martingale style things as well. But this is very easy for me. Again, I just like easy. So this is now a collar and a leash. This is now a toy and a leash. This could even become a collar and a toy and a leash. I like stuff like that. And my dogs will tug on biothane. It's not that. It's just not as pleasurable. And it's not going to hold up as well as something that's like made into a tug. These are regular biothane leashes that we sell and that we give to our clients. We normally just have them in black now. We don't have all the colors. But I love these leashes. They don't hold smell. They're 6-foot leashes. And this is basically all we train dogs on. It's just a very basic biothane leash.
They are not chew-proof.
No.
And they are not not the type
No.
of leash you want to tug. Just like a leather leash, you can have a really nice, expensive leather leash. A dog will probably chew through that in one bite if they have some decent molars in their head.
But I would mention, too, with that, the leather may be more attractive for your dog to bite on. Not that the dog can't chew the biothane, like if they're teething or they just enjoy chewing or destructive behavior, but the leather may be more enticing for them to bite than something else.
It's not an animal product.
Yeah. And that is another reason we do biothane, right? I'm really big into animal rights kind of stuff. I don't do leather. I don't eat meat. This is a thing for me. So I love the biothane because I'm not contributing to the leather issue. And if you love leather and you love your gear and everything, more power to you. I just personally don't want to spend my money or have that in our house.
I only use leather on my women.
That's enough. Okay. Moving along, we have a big rope leash here. A lot of people like these really thick rope leashes. They are harder to chew through. I would say they're a chewing deterrent.
Great puppy leash. If you have a real mouthy puppy that's going through that teething stage, and I tell them to drag a leash around, you can't beat a nice heavy rope leash. They're not going to chew through it.
Yeah. So, and of course, there's probably 100 different other types of leashes that you can buy.
Oh, there is one I'd like to mention before we get out of it.
Is it going to be the same thought?
There's a couple more I'm going to mention.
Okay.
Tell me what your thought was.
I was going to talk about the traffic handle.
I was thinking about that one. One of the two.
All right. What's your other one?
The retractable.
Oh, we shit on both of them all the time. So, all right, let's go. Who wants to go first? You talk about the retractable.
Well, the retractable, I mean, you need to learn, if you're going to use a retractable, you should actually know how to use a retractable. It's not just to give your dog 12 feet of leash wherever it wants 12 feet of leash. It's not to just be running in and out on 12 feet constantly. If I use a retractable, and I'm leaving the house with a retractable, I've locked it at 4 feet or so. That dog is going to walk out on a loose leash.
We have not owned a retractable in a long time.
There's
I don't know the last
sometimes
time
it's
we've
great
used
for
it.
it. I mean, like I've used
It's good for, I like it for competition obedience, like driving back with a dumbbell or something. I like it if I want something like that. What did you used it for practically? I can't even remember something you would use it for.
If I had stopped at a busy rest stop on the side of the highway and I want my dog to go potty and I want to give them more freedom than 6 feet, I could put them on a retractable and let them zip out 10, 12 feet, lift their leg on a tree, and then, just give them a little more freedom, but safely because there's Mack trucks flying down the freeway, stuff like that.
And to potty a puppy, I guess retractable can be great. And if you love your retractable, that's fine. That's all on you. Be aware that the retractables can get the dogs in front of cars in the streets. They can get the dogs, rushing up on things they're not supposed to rush up on. They can wrap around people. Like, this is something people don't realize with the retractables, but if you're at Petco and then your dog takes a turn, all of a sudden you're all wrapped up, somebody else is all wrapped up, a kid is all wrangled. So just be very conscientious of, if you do like a retractable, how you're using it, and also locking that sometimes, because if your dog always thinks a leash means like I have either 2 or 20 feet, they're going to just interpret that as a leash.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the traffic handle leash. We do not like the traffic handle leash.
Well, I wanted to finish up on my...
You got more retractable?
Well, just that one of the hidden dangers of a retractable is losing a finger.
That's true.
And it's like such an issue that they even put it on they have like a label on there because enough people have sued the company.
Yeah, and rope burn is totally a thing. Like, you can be there. I can't remember an instance where this happened, but I have the leash. I'm maybe holding it for some reason stupidly in my other hand. The dog goes. Like, it can cause damage. So the retractables, if you use them and buyer beware and use them as a responsible dog owner.
And lastly, you can really hurt a shoulder. And this did happen to me about 15 years ago where I had a dog on a retractable to pee. And I was not watching the dog just for a second. And the dog took off after a squirrel. This is a pet dog. And it got a good head start because it had 12 feet of leash. So the dog's 4 feet from me. And then it got almost a 10-foot of run before it hit the end of the leash and pulled on my shoulder. And I'm reminded again, these retractables suck.
And I'm just going to say, because you brought the pottying up again, and I didn't throw you under the bus for it the first time, teach your dog to potty on a 6-foot leash. This is something Scott doesn't do with his dogs. His dogs do it now. This is even a how to calm your canine exercise, you guys. I am so obsessed with teaching your dog to potty on a leash because so many people don't think about it. And then when the time comes, they're like, oh, I need to get the dog away. The dog needs to go farther away, everything else. Just teach your dog to potty on a 6-foot leash when they're young. And right now, we're in that setup right now. Every pet dog we have, the puppy, the German Shepherd puppy, I do take out on a long line for his own sake. But every dog we have potties on a 6-foot leash, and it happens within 24 hours. So if your dog doesn't currently potty on a leash, make a plan so your dog does, and a 6-foot is safer than the retractable. Okay, can we talk traffic handle?
I'd love to talk traffic handle.
How many clients would you say have that leash?
At least 50%.
Yeah, this is a common thing, right? I don't even
have one. It's a 6-foot leash, so they feel like I got a 6-foot leash.
But then it has this
but they only use 2 feet
hole.
of it.
Yeah, they have this grabby hole. So, I suppose if you have a physical disability or something else, it's fine to be able to grab that in emergency. But what happens is this becomes the person's holding the end of the traffic lead in one hand and then the actual part of the traffic lead, that's 2 feet from the dog's neck in the other hand. And the dog is just dragging. You're using all of your might to keep the dog from basically pulling you down. And that type of leash encourages pulling. Scott is a big advocate of, if you're going to walk your dog on a loose leash, you need to have some sort of J in the leash. There needs to be slack in the leash. That is a loose leash. Just because your dog is on a 6-foot leash and being, positioned next to you, however you've been trained to walk it or taught to walk it or whatever video you've seen to walk it, if it's not on a loose leash, it's not actively walking on a loose leash next to you. You're just forcing this and making this happen. And the traffic lead not only inadvertently can get the dog next to you in a pretend way, but it really can encourage pulling because the dog is just feeling this pressure, whether it's on a harness or on a neck or anything else. It's feeling okay, you're pulling back, I'm pulling forward. There's always this opposition reflex. So if you have pulling issues, the traffic lead is not what we would recommend.
And I have met people that have been taught by other trainers to
heal
their dog
by
only giving it enough leash so it's walking right next to you.
Strangest thing we've ever seen.
The deceptive aspect of that is that people associate pulling with it's hard to hold their dog back.
Yeah, or the dog's out in front.
Pulling is if there's any tension at all. Because I say to them, the best way to evaluate your healing work is to drop the leash. What's going to happen? Is the dog is nothing going to change? or is the dog immediately just going to either run away or float away from you? So if you're giving the dog slack or dropping the leash and it's not staying the same, then what you've been doing up to that point isn't working, in my opinion.
And for us, like, we don't want a dog ever pulling on their neck, like, just consistently. Like, you're going to get trachea damage. I don't care what the dog is wearing. I see it most often with a flat collar. Like, the dog's just pulling, or a slip lead is another good example of that. The dog's always pulling on it, and they actually get trachea damage from that. If they're not pulling, they're not creating stress on their neck, right? And this is why everyone went to harnesses, but most of the dogs on harnesses are either pulling if the dog's leash is clipped on the front or on the back, they're still pulling. And those front attaches, as a little aside, like, there's some good research out there that if those shoulders are turned, every which way, and the dog, while it's walking, is always orthopedically, like, pulling and looking back at the handler, that is not good on your dog's body long term. So we would highly recommend you teach your dog to walk on a loose leash. And if the leash is something your dog hates, try to create a more positive experience with the leash. Do something your dog enjoys with the leash. Just put the leash on at night while you're watching TV, clip it to your dog, unclip it. If your dog...
Give him a marrow bone while he put his leash on.
If your dog gets totally over-aroused just by the sight of the leash, try to see if you can get some control beyond that. I mean, if our dogs are the kind of dogs that they can, like, be bouncing at the door and then we say sit and they hold a sit. So I don't care. As long as I can control the behavior, I don't care.
Your dogs do that.
Yeah, your dogs, we just try to keep Scott's dogs alive at this point. But literally, like, whatever you're seeing from your dog with the leash, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, if you want to change it. And you're very capable of doing that. You just need to put in, like, a step-by-step plan of, like, okay, I'm going to try it in this instance. Okay, he loves this. If the dog is always super excited when the kids come home, put the leash on the dog when the kids come home. See, will the dog maybe run up to the kids and not jump? Maybe that's a benefit. Like, try it out so it works well for your situation. And I do want to mention, like, to me, I would say, like, a competition obedience dog basically should look the same with a leash or without the leash. So, like, that's a pretty good example of, like, when they're doing, like, focused healing and competition obedience, like, taking that leash off, they want that to be seamless, right? Like, you're walking in for open or utility. As you take the leash off, you don't want any behavior change. Like, you want the focus to stay the same. You just want it to be this seamless transition of, like, okay, I'm doing my off leash here. Those whole programs are off leash, and you want it to be seamless. If the leash is what's controlling your dog or creating more control or getting your focused healing or something else, you need to go back and reevaluate that foundational training. And that's a very separate thing from, like, pet dog stuff and everything else. But I would say, in my mind, like, protection or competition obedience or something like that, like, a leash being on or off should not change the picture whatsoever. And the high-level trainers, that isn't. I just wanted to mention that as an aside.
Yeah, and I say, with training an untrained dog, a 6-foot leash is a training leash.
Yeah.
That's to train a dog that doesn't know how to work on a leash. As the dog becomes more proficient, you'll find that 6 feet is really too much.
Yeah, there's a lot of extra. Depending on the person's size and the dog size. Like,
if you are working with a little person,
no, if the person is your size and it's like a little, like, dachshund, like, the longer leash, it just really depends, how everything. The
point I was going to make is that you can also purchase a 4-foot leash.
Yeah.
And then when we did obedience in the sport that I was involved in, it was a meter leash that you used.
Yeah. Oh, I had 39
that in the car. Inches. So a 39-inch leash is more than enough leash. If you're holding it in your left hand and the dog is heeling next to you, there's more than enough. But there isn't a lot of room for error if the dog decides to float away from you. If it sees a bird, if it stalls, if it does anything, all of a sudden there's tension on the leash, which would be a disqualifying.
Yeah, but from a sport perspective, you should be able to work on a 4-footer probably just as easily. And
But I wouldn't start on a short leash. It's going to be very difficult to maintain
I grabbed that, and
slack.
I think it's sitting out in my Honda right now. But Scott actually was so smart that he had the meter leashes made with the suit material. So then when he was rewarding Jimmy, it was, like, almost as rewarding as, like, not as rewarding as the suit, but, like, it was the same material. So
it was more like an agility leash.
Yeah, he wrote Arno, and he's like, hey, can you make me some, meter leashes out of the suit material? And that is another leash that we have frequently. But the 4-foot leash, like, I don't want dogs just pulling. If we're going out to potty or something, 6-foot. And we, like, when we take our dogs out and, like, walk them, like, I walk Sink on the street for exercise a lot. It's not like I want her, like, perfectly next to me or something else. I just don't want her dragging me. And when we take our dogs out, they're totally comfortable being loose in front of us on a 6-foot leash. It's not like we have this like militant, like, oh my gosh, you have to be here. So the 6-foot leash just gives our dogs more room to go sniff if they want, go pee, whatever they want to do. We're big on 6-footers in our house for most things.
My dog's so out of control, I walk him on a 15-foot leash. When we
That
go
just
for a walk,
makes everything
I
look
just
better.
let him, he likes to mark. So he gets like 10 feet ahead of me, marks on a tree. I walk all the way past him, another 15 feet, and then he's like, okay, I'll go to the next tree.
He's often not on a long line either. All right, regardless, whatever your leash situation is at home, give it a gander. And if you want to change it, know that you can. Just have a plan of action in place and figure out, I want my dog to like the leash more. I want my dog to react less aroused when it sees the leash. Whatever you want, change it and make that like something that you're going to commit to between now and the end of 2022, because a leash is important and leashes aren't going anywhere, guys. Trust me. Trust me.
Yeah, and in conclusion, I would much prefer that a dog is excited about a leash than looking at it as an aversive or even neutral. If you pick the leash up and the dog could care less, that means that the dog is finding no value in working with you.
Yeah.
Because the leash is part of the team activity where you're working together.
Yeah, anytime we pick up any equipment, whatever it is, our dogs are like, woo, we're going to party. It's going to be great. All right, thanks so much for joining us. We will see you guys next week. We are going to talk about how to make your dog do something that he or she may not want to next week. Everyone's going to love it. In the meantime, keep it quirky.
Oh, hey.
You almost lost the pig.
He was trying to, I need to put a leash on him.
Bye.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.